Hey, how's your week going so far? My name is Alicia.
I'm Nicole.
Let's take a little time away from the hustle and bustle of adulting and let's indulge our curiosities just for a bit and talk about killers, psychos, and the unexplained.
Today we are venturing to Kansas to talk about the Bloody Benders and Richard Grissom.
Welcome to Kansas, where Richard Anthony Grissom Jr. abducted and murdered three women over an 8-day period in Johnson County, Kansas. He's also suspected in murdering a former girlfriend and was in juvenile detention for killing an elderly neighbor as a teenager. Richard Anthony Grissom Jr. was born in South Korea on November 10th, 1960. After his birth, his parents gave him to an orphanage, where 3 years later he was adopted by U.S. Sergeant Richard Anthony Grissom Sr. and his wife, Fredonia. After moving across multiple states, the family settled in Kansas. During high school, Richard is described as friendly, good looking, popular, and smart. He was an AB student. He was a halfback for the school's football team. However, according to Richard, he was allegedly abused by his father. After having an argument with his parents, Richard stormed out of the house on January 27th, 1977, so about 17 years old. He ended up stealing a railroad spike, which he used to break into the home of his neighbor, 72-year-old Hazel Meeker, and he beat her to death with that.
What?
Yeah. Then he left her house and broke into another home, which fortunately the residents weren't home at the time, but their handgun was there, and Richard surely stole that. Hazel's granddaughter, Carla, went to visit her grandmother, but found her dead body in a pool of blood. After contacting the police, an investigation was conducted, and they found footprints in the snow. They actually were able to follow these prints all the way to where Richard was hiding at a trailer park. When they noticed him, Grissom attempted to bury the handgun he had stolen in the snow. However, the police seen this happening and they handcuffed him before he could fully bury this. While in custody, Richard confessed to the murder. He was convicted, but since he was so young, he was tried as a juvenile and transferred to a boys' industrial center in Topeka. Grissom was released in 1980. So what is that? 3 years for murdering somebody with a railroad spike? And enrolled at Kansas State University. He was on the track team and known as, quote, Rock Man, end quote, since he would fall on almost every jump. So apparently he wasn't very good at this. Richard played racquetball and even joined the softball team. So apparently he really enjoyed the athletics things. He was studying architecture and working at Arby's. Well, Richard decided to make a little change in his life. I guess spice it up. He started stealing, stole some money from a resume service, and even a Mazda RX-7. I don't know what that is, but it sounds fancy. Mazda RX, which he did end up going to prison for. But then he was paroled in June 1988. In 1989, Richard started dating Terry Renee Manes, a 25-year-old college student. On June 6, Terry's deceased body was found by her neighbor. She was nude, strangled, and stabbed to death. On June 12, 1989, a masked individual broke into an apartment of 23-year-old Michelle Kapf in South Kansas City. As she slept in her bed, the man awoke her and attempted to force her outside with a gun to her head. After a struggle, during which witnesses began to notice the assault was happening, the man fled back to his vehicle and drove off. 6 days later, on June 18th, 1989, 24-year-old Joan Marie Butler of Overland Park went missing. She was last seen at the Country Club Plaza in Missouri by her friends. 7 days after her disappearance, her rental car was found in an apartment complex, with witnesses recalling a man fleeing from the car. In the car, police located a single bloodstain. Period. The following day, two roommates, Teresa Brown and Christine Roosh, both 22, hosted a party which was meant to be like a farewell to Brown. She was moving. The next day, when the two did not show up for work and they were reported missing, Richard was identified on surveillance cameras using Joanne's bank card, or Joan's bank card, which was the 24-year-old previously.
Okay.
There wasn't any evidence of a kidnapping. He was only charged with one count of theft. Friends at Teresa's going away party identified Richard as being at the party that night that the friends had disappeared. When law enforcement searched Richard's vehicle, Teresa and Christine's credit cards were found in there. There was also some pubic hairs that they collected from the house, and the DNA was matched to Richard as well. So Richard is now on the run. The other women still had not been found, but the FBI was able to locate Richard, who was hanging out in Texas now. On July 7th, he was arrested and interrogated for 8 hours. Richard wasn't talking much, though. He was requesting an attorney. Despite that, no trace of the women had yet to be found. Authorities had enough evidence to suggest that all three had been killed and charged Grissom with the 3 counts of first-degree murder. 1 count of aggravated kidnapping, 4 counts of aggravated robbery, 2 counts of aggravated burglary, and 1 count of burglary and 1 count of theft. So in November, Richard was finally extracted back to Kansas. Now, the evidence was all circumstantial, no bodies, so they never found Teresa's or Christine's or Marie. However, I guess they had enough evidence to take him to court and charge him. Probably because
Oh,
the pubic hairs, the DNA evidence at the house, the surveillance cameras, him using their credit card or their debit cards at ATM machines.
yeah, I guess that makes sense.
It's all circumstantial, like I said. But, however, on November 4th, after 12 hours of deliberation, Richard was found guilty on all 3 murder charges. So, Joanne Marie Butler, Teresa Brown, Christine Roosh, and sentenced to serve 4 life terms. Richard still has not admitted guilt that he did any of this, and he joined a internet pen pal group kind of to pass his time in prison,
Okay.
but he does. Putting an end to this awful case. He's just hanging out in prison, writing to all the people. But whatever happened to Terry Massis, his kind of girlfriend? Like that wasn't even, she just kind of disappeared, I guess.
It
Nothing ever.
doesn't it it doesn't have any more information about that?
And also, why after he murdered like Hazel with that railroad spike? I mean, I know he was young, but still, like 3 years. That's it. Anyway, frustrating.
Oh, very frustrating. Well, the Bender family, called Bloody Benders, were a family of serial killers who lived in Labette County, Kansas. They lived there from May 1871 to December of 1872. That's not a very long time frame if anyone's paying attention. The family consisted of John Bender, his wife Kate Sr., their son John Jr., and their daughter Kate Jr.
What?
Yeah, so as I'm investigating this more, I'll just go off on a tangent now and tell you they're not even sure if those were their actual names
Okay.
or if any of these people were actually related. Okay. So in October 1870, John Sr. and Jr. registered for 160 acres. Because back then apparently you could just go register, I'm gonna live on this piece of property. It's not like now, right? They built a cabin, a barn, a corral, and a well. And in 1871, the women arrived. Benders ran a storefront, a diner, and a hotel for travelers on the trail. So they got this. Say it again.
Dang, they did a whole lot in that year.
Yeah, they did. So there was this trail, and I apologize because I forgot to write down the name of it, but this trail that was very popular that people would travel through on their way through Kansas, okay? And it was very popular until people started disappearing and then people stopped using it. But They, because it was so popular, decided to buy a piece of property on this trail. Well, register the piece of property. I don't even think they had to pay for it. That's the part I'm getting to. I don't think they had to pay for anything. They just had to register and say they were going to live there. And that's why they built all this stuff, because they were going to live on the trail, and they needed a way to make money, right? Because they weren't living in any kind of town. However, John Sr. was around 60 years old and spoke very little English. Kate Sr. was 55 and apparently very mean. John Jr. was 25 and spoke fluent English and German. And Kate Jr. was 23 and spoke English well. She was a self proclaimed healer and a psychic. So that comes into play too. She did seances for people and gave lectures on spiritualism, mostly on their property. But this is what Kate Jr. was very well known for. And so she became very popular, and this attracted more travelers to their inn. The younger Benders frequently went to Sunday school, and the Benders were widely believed to have been German immigrants. The two seniors may have actually been named Elvira and William, and they may have actually been a married couple. No one's sure. However, the 1870 census shows two Johns, a Mary, and a Catherine. So now that we've established they may or may not be related or married to each other, let's get into their murders. Kate Sr. is believed to have killed several husbands and had 12 children in that time frame. But this is before they meet up and move to Kansas, okay? Kate Jr. is believed to be her fifth child. At May of 1871, the body of Jones was discovered in Drum Creek with a cut throat and a crushed skull. In February of 1872, two bodies of men were found in the same injuries. And by 1873, reports of missing travelers became so common that travelers just began to avoid that trail altogether. So they would put committees together to arrest horse thieves from the area, and they started accusing the horse thieves of the missing people, only to let them go later or be run out of town. They this whole time have no idea it's the family doing it. In the winter of 1872, George Loncourt and his infant daughter resettled in Iowa and were never seen again. In spring of 1873, his neighbor went to look for them, but never made it back home. The neighbor was someone named Dr. William Henry York, and he had two brothers, a Civil War veteran slash lawyer and a member of the state senate. And his name was Colonel Alexander York, and then his other brother was Ed York. Apparently, they were a very affluent family. Obviously, you can see they were into politics and stuff. And so when their brother failed to return from his travel plans, they went on a search for him. They questioned 50 people, and in March of 28th of 1873, Alexander arrived at the Benders Inn. The Benders admitted the brother had been there, and the Yorks believed the Benders and their neighbors, the Roaches, were guilty and wanted to hang them all, but they needed evidence. So many accusations started circulating. The Yorks got a warrant to search every homestead between Big Hill Creek and Drum Creek. No one, and because all this is going on, it's also in March, so there's still snow on the ground and inclement weather, and we're talking horse and carriage time. So it's taking them a really long time to do these searches. And in the meantime, the Benders have gotten word that this is happening and they have fled. And they've been gone for several days before anyone notices. A bad odor was noticed in their house, and they traced it to a trap door underneath one of the beds. The trap door was nailed shut. They opened it and found blood in a 6 by 7 by 3 foot hole. There was no bodies, though. They then moved the whole cabin, like, because back then it wasn't on a foundation, right? So a bunch of men picked up the freaking cabin and moved it off of where it was, and they started digging in that hole and around it, but they never found any bodies in that area. Then they used a metal pole as a probe and walked around the land around the house and started probing the land. They found Dr. York's body later that evening, and they found 9 more bodies that night, and another 8 the next day. The last body was found in a well with several body parts. All but one had their heads bashed in with a hammer and their throat cut. The young girl's body they found was either strangled or buried alive, and instead of being brutally murdered. Although, I don't know, being buried alive? I think I'd rather you smash my head in with a hammer than be buried alive.
I would take the hammer.
So, a Kansas newspaper said that such a crowd had gathered that a friend of the Benders showed up there to find out what was going on. And they hung him, revived him, questioned him, and repeated this process 3 more times before they let him go. I what? Girl, isn't that torture?
Yeah.
A $2,000 reward for the family's arrest was put out by the state, and then $1,000 reward from the family. So you had a chance to earn $3,000 if you gave these people up. So this is what would happen. They're surmising. When a guest stayed at the Bender's bed and breakfast inn, the host would give the guest a seat of honor at the table positioned over the trap door. The victim's back would be to a curtain, and Kate would distract the guest while one of the men would hit the guest on the right side of the head with a hammer, and then one of the women would cut the victim's throat to ensure death, and then the body was dropped through the trap door. Once in the cellar, the body would be stripped and later buried somewhere. Girl, I don't know if they mean stripped of their personal belongings or if they mean stripped of their flesh. It isn't clear, so I'm unsure. It doesn't talk about cannibalism at all, so I think it's just their personal belongings. But I just wanted to throw that out there.
The Benders.
And then once in the cellar, the body would be stripped, and then they would later bury it somewhere, usually out in their orchard. That's where they found most of the bodies. Most of their victims weren't wealthy, and they were killed just for the thrill. They would sell the stolen goods, saying people who couldn't afford to pay paid in goods. Which, I mean, back then, a lot of people trade and barter, right? So people didn't think anything of it. Detectives did find a set of wagon tracks that led 12 miles north of their house. They found an abandoned team of horses and a wagon, and the horses were nearly starved to death by the time they found them. The Benders are thought to have bought tickets to get on a train at that point. John Jr. and Kate caught a new train at some point towards Texas. However, no one followed them since lawmen following outlaws into that region were never seen again. Yeah, that's what I said. The older Benders continued north to Kansas City and then to St. Louis, Missouri. People searched on and off for all 4 Benders for 50 years. Now, at this point, the dad and mom, if that's actually who they were, have to have passed, okay? So after the bodies were found, Addison Roach and his son-in-law, William Buxton, were arrested among 12 others, all for being accessories. So they assisted in burying bodies, selling stolen goods. Did not take place in the murder itself, but definitely assisted in the after effect. In conclusion, 20 bodies were found and 20 more speculated from the body parts that they found. Most bodies were never claimed, even if they kind of knew who they were. Like, the family didn't come claim them. I don't know why. When they did the search of the house, they found 3 hammers, a shoe hammer, a claw hammer, and a sledgehammer. All of these hammers matched indents in people's skulls. There's a Bender Museum in Cherryvale, Kansas. So if you want to visit and see the hammers, that's where they are. Where do you think the notorious family went to?
I think the older two probably died. I would go to that museum though, and that I would, but the younger two probably. I mean, if they came from Germany, who knows?
Who? That's what I'm saying. They could have went back to Germany. They could have went to another country. Who knows that, right?
That time, no one really kept track. And obviously, Kate Junior. It wasn't Kate Junior. She was, whatever. Who knows?
Exactly.
Okay, so now let's finish this off with a little of the unexplained. Kansas's cryptid creature is Sinkhole Sam. First sighted in the 1920s, it is said to reside in Inman's Big Sinkhole, which used to be part of a lake. It is said to be a snake-like creature that is at least 15 foot long and it is as big around as a tire with a fluked tail. So massive. Its grin is described as Cheshire cat-like. And in 1952, two boys were fishing in the area and had an encounter with Sinkhole Sam. The boys claimed that they shot at it a few times with a 22 shotgun, but it wasn't even phased. It didn't even affect it. It grinned its Cheshire grin and sinked or slithered or whatever it did back under, disappearing. Groups went out looking to try to find Sinkhole Sam, but they never did find him. It's theorized it was maybe some kind of prehistoric snake and has since passed away, but who really knows? Have you ever heard of Sinkhole Sam? Let us know. We're interested.
I just want to say I'm not really a huge fan of snakes to begin with. Besides the fact that they like eat rodents and stuff, that's cool. But like I am not a big fan, and so there's no way I'd have been shooting at it. Girl, I probably would have died of a heart attack.
I was visualizing like Beetlejuice, like when they go into the desert area and those big snakes come up. That's what I was visualizing.
Yeah, it meant like what they're talking about. Yes, it would be like that.
Mm. No thanks.
I'm good. But we would like to thank you for joining us on our discoveries of Kansas this week. Please join us next week when we travel to Kentucky. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss our adventures next week into killers, psychos, and the unexplained.
Bye bye.
Bye!